Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I guess like, let's talk about the flywheel. We already started, so I think we just talked about.
Wait, hang on, Flo. Hang on. I got
Hang
told
on.
recently from someone that a listener that requested that we give a short introduction before we start, so they know who are these cool people that they're listening to.
Do you do this
So
every single time?
I don't know. Let's just say this is Florian as usual, and this is Jason as usual, and
Yeah.
we're from Tokenomics DAO, and yeah, we just wanted to talk today about turning the flywheel and how that equates to how we put our energy into building the tokenomics DAO, right?
Yeah. So we just started talking about I think Jim Collins. He wrote this book, Good to Great. I read it a long time ago, so I don't really remember everything. But the way he describes this flywheel, as I recall roughly, is that he says like his like a company is this could be this like this flywheel, and it's spinning super fast and it's unstoppable. And then I think in the book that he wrote, he kind of asked this question, like, what was the event that started the flywheel, got it spinning? And the answer is basically that there's no one event that got it spinning. It was basically the combination of many events pushing in the right direction, right? And I think this is also, or that was like the idea that we had, where just like as usually, how we pick our podcast topics. Sometimes it's an interview, sometimes it's something that we're currently trying to figure out within the DAO, or sometimes it's just like something that we, on one of our daily meetings, we just find out, hey, that this would be super interesting to just brainstorm on or think through. And so we came upon this like flywheel. And I guess like the flywheel that we were specifically thinking about is this idea that currently the way Tokenomics DAO is kind of structures, or how we envision it to be, is we have the community, and the community is like this large pool of talent, and the community from here they can produce content, and the production of content is then sort of a proof of work. So it's this, we create this content, and then everybody out there can read it and see the content, and then clients or someone might read it and think like, oh, these guys, they've written a lot of content, so they seem to know a thing or two about tokenomics. So I'll reach out to them and see if they can consult us, they can help us with our tokenomics problem. And then someone, we might come to an agreement with them, work on a project. Both parties will learn a lot, like even we do usually learn a lot from consulting engagements. And then that person, after the consulting engagement, would come back to the community and have a lot more knowledge to share and write another piece of content, right? And that content will then attract more. So to me, when we thought this through, we thought like, this is kind of a flywheel, right? That we have.
It is a virtuous cycle, right? It feeds into each other. And at the same time, so with Jim Collins and what he talks about, with the little bit that we've looked at, he says that it's, in a consistent direction, right? So in this case, we do have a direction, and that is to build value in this sphere, right? And and that's why things like the manifesto is so important, because it just keeps in whatever activity we do, it should be consistent in the sense that it adheres to that manifesto, right? And creating content in this case, allows for different activities, different types of activities to come into play that are still pushing towards this direction, right? Like if we do a piece of consulting work, or if we write a piece of content, while they feed into each other, the important aspect is still that they're moving in a certain direction, that we as a DAO are moving into a certain direction, right? Getting better in a certain way, becoming more valuable towards certain things, right?
Like building building our brand, because they would all sort of contribute to building a brand. Because on the one side, a piece of content would contribute to building a brand, attracting followers potentially, and then a consulting project would also do the same. Would do the same, right? And they would all then like attract more people to join the community, because they would think, hey, this is probably a cool place to discuss topics or thoughts that I have in this area, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's, I mean, like that's kind of a given, and then like one of the problems that we talked about was, or is still, we haven't figured that out completely, is like consulting. If we do a consulting project, like we don't only want to focus on consulting. That's definitely something that has been clear from the beginning, right? We don't want to be this like consulting only thing, but definitely one thing it does is it produces revenue, right? It like if clients pay for it and we have expertise, we can sell that expertise to them, and they can they'll have some value that we've given them, and we have some money, or the consultants get some money. So what it does, it attracts talent to join the DAO, because they might want to do consulting projects, share their knowledge, and earn money in Web3 in this space from clients. So then to me, what happens, like if you think of this like flywheel, what happens is you attract people to come to consulting and do consulting projects. So you have like this high or strong focus onto consulting, but that deters or shifts away, in my opinion, a bit from content. So I was sort of worried that what that does would like stop people to create content, because they only want to come in and do consulting. Because if you write a great article and we publish that on our Substack, I mean, I don't know, maybe 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 people would read it, but wouldn't pay you at all, right? And so we were kind of, the idea is like, how do we solve for that problem? How do we solve? Because what we see, as if we see the flywheel in its entirety, that content is very important, and we need to keep producing content to attract more clients and to build this brand, create this gravity, and create like this external proof of work, i.e. reputation. And so it's an important thing to do. So what can we do?
Let's try and maybe define it a little bit and simplify it a little bit, so that we can grasp the principles behind these things, right? So let's say writing content by itself, if I was to be very blunt, it's almost like it's just a cost center, right? There's no direct path between writing content and the content writer understanding how he's going to monetize that content. You need people to come, you need people to read it, you need people to pay. Maybe you need to write 10 articles before it builds critical mass. Maybe you need to build 100, maybe it will never happen, right? So therefore, the whole endeavor is a very, what's the right word? It's not defined. The steps between the cause and effect, they're not as well defined as, say, if you were to do a piece of consulting work where somebody said, hey, I need you to create this, and after you create this, you will get paid this much, right? And while you were describing the problem, something came to mind. It might be something similar to, say, a lecturer or an architect, writing a book or giving lectures or discussing, architecture or home building versus a home builder, right? For a home builder, what does he do? He builds a home, and then he gets paid. So he's incentivized to build as many homes as possible, as cheaply as possible, for as many people as possible to get paid more. But it might not actually revolutionize the science or the practice of home building. He'll become more effective and more efficient, but he might not come out with a new way or a novel way to build something like in a massive transformational sort of phase shift, right? Whereas if you had a forum of people discussing ideas on home building, talking about, hey, we know that in this part of the world, the sun always shines in this direction. So if one natural light, why don't we put windows here and, shading there and blah, blah, blah. That's taking a transitional step forward in that sphere, right? And that breakthrough would then generate a lot of interest, and maybe people come in and go, hey, this way of living in such a home is so much nicer. Let's build new homes this way instead, right? So I think that it's a roundabout way, I guess, of what we were saying about content versus consulting, right? One is doing something we already know, and another, and for consulting, and for creating content, you're kind of pushing the boundaries, both in your own mind, in your own understanding, and also putting ideas out there that can then be cross-pollinated, let's say, with other people that have their own ideas, that will comment and will probably write another piece of content that is based on your content.
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like a derivative of a derivative of a derivative, right? So me and Florian and I and Lovis and a few other guys were discussing, like, so how do we keep encouraging or incentivizing people that have created content to keep creating content, and maybe even those that are consulting to maybe share, what they've learned with the greater community. And we hope that we can incentivize that, because it will be very powerful if the home builders can come and take part in the architectural courses, right? So that they can say their perspective and share what they've learned from building 100 different homes,
Yeah. In a way, I mean, like a simple way that like obviously comes to mind immediately is like, if you take a cut, because you take a cut off the revenue generated from consulting and distribute that over to the content side, the content division, right? So you pay the content division with the money coming from the consulting division, right? Because in a way, it's sales, right? What the content division does for consulting is like they're selling services through reputation.
Definitely marketing,
Or
I would say.
Maybe not they're selling, but they're marketing them. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Marketing, branding.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
They might not be closing the sale. They might be, I don't know, but it definitely helps build the brand.
They will get them like quite close, right? Because if you get someone to the point where they've read 10 pieces and that has, they like them all, and that maybe has convinced them that that we have knowledge in this area, they'll be quite close to, or be quite confident to do something with us.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely brings them along the line of getting qualified as a lead, right? At first, it's marketing, in a sense, it's lead generation.
Yeah.
And as they read and it resonates with them, they become more and more qualified. And if they then approach us, it's like the perfect way to create sales, right? Where both entities come away from an interaction getting benefit, no forced cold calling or no strong arm, secondhand car salesman tactics needed, right?
Yeah. It's much better. It's a much better system. Because like, let's say like you would, so let's do this example, right? Let's say in the community, to get consulting deals or get consulting business, we would recruit a couple of salespeople that would go out and actively try to sell our consulting services to potential clients. And they would get 10% off the lead, or the deal size, right? For bringing in the lead. And that's something that, probably would work, could bring in a few consultants, but it doesn't scale because you need one resource going out to convince one client, and then he's getting a share of it. But if you would like deploy this resource into creating great content, then that can be read by potentially millions of potential clients, right? And not just one. So this one sales guy, he doesn't really scale because he needs to like cold call all of them. But if you get them to produce an article or some videos or I don't know what, explaining the concepts, then that can be read by many, many people, right?
Yeah. So did any thoughts come to mind as to how to incentivize content creation? Because, right, there is a danger that when you pay somebody to create content, or like, let's say the incentivization scheme is financial.
Yeah.
Sometimes the content becomes commoditized, right? And you also don't want that, because then it goes into that realm of, oh, are you going to pay me for how many words I write?
Yeah.
Or are you going to pay me for how many? Yeah, exactly. Not principal, you're very agent, right?
Yeah.
So, I said agent, not Asian. Just wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say it. You know?
I could. Yeah.
I'd be racist if I'd say that.
Yeah, well. All right, let's shift gears again. Sorry. So how do we do that? I mean, it's so difficult because, you know, if you judge people then by likes or by comments or by, you know, views, is that good enough? Because maybe it's not the right comments, maybe it's not the right views, but it's getting closer, right, than paying them per word, correct?
Or per
article.
Them dollars, right? I mean, like, maybe if we put this onto like on a scale, let's say you just pay them dollars, you would say like, I'll pay you $10 per word. It's probably a lot, but I'll pay you $1 per word. That's I guess the worst, because then you're totally agent. You just that was intentional.
Oh my gosh.
Oh god. So you just write as many words as you can, but you don't care about the quality or anything else. So another way of doing it, and that's probably like the second best thing. You could pay them maybe like in just tokens. And
which tokens though? Tokens of that entity that they're writing for?
Yes. To make them principals. So you would give them a share of the entity they're writing for. So the flywheel they are working on, you'll give them a piece of that flywheel. And so that would probably be better, because they would over time become principals, and like the more ownership they have, I guess the more the incentive of them personally would be aligned with the incentives of the flywheel, right? So that they would then get more and more towards producing really great content that people would read and help the business as a whole, right?
Correct. Yeah. And you know what I like about that, Flo? There's just came to mind again while you were speaking. The payout, while it's not as direct, right? You hold a token that could be worth more in the future, but in one way, it's very holistic, in a sense. Like when you're writing now, the only thing in your mind is, does this help build the brand? Because again, you're thinking like a principle, right?
Yeah.
Am I helping the community as a whole become more educated, become more knowledgeable? That's also a very principled way of thinking.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about it that I really like, and maybe it's my personality, but I think a lot of people in the Web3 space think like that. It's the more abundance versus scarcity, right? On that scale, they're thinking in terms of, okay, unlimited upside. When you do a consulting gig, it's very direct. You get paid pretty direct, right?
Per hour,
but if let's say not per hour, like, because we want to get away from, you know, working time-based, but let's say even you get paid to create a piece of work, right? A piece of code, whatever, a light paper, right? That's it. You get paid and that's it. It's done. You know, that's it. It's never gonna come and when you're retired,
like
it's
compound.
not gonna pay you. Yeah, it's not gonna pay you interest when you're retired, right?
Yeah.
So while it's direct, it's linear. Whereas if you pay people in tokens when they create content, it's indirect, but it's exponential.
Yeah.
So I think if we can somehow crack that code, then it's gonna be a lot of people will think, hey, maybe they're not gonna just only be content creators, but they'll go, hey, I'm gonna spend 80% of my time building homes. I'm gonna spend 20% of my time sharing knowledge from the homes I've built, because that sharing of knowledge helps everyone, and it's not a zero-sum game. And yeah, that thing gives me that call option on this industry taking off, and I want to build towards this industry taking off because I have a call option.
Yeah.
On that result, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think that'd be a quite a cool mechanism, and then you could probably even like, improve the whole thing by doing stuff like, you said earlier, right? You would measure what the actual impact of the piece of content is, right? And you would then set different levels of, maybe you'll say like how many reads or how many interactions the piece of content has gotten, and the higher, the more you would get paid, because then you wouldn't like incentivizing for words is probably the worst thing you can do, and I guess like that's obvious. So like,
yeah, the first paragraph will read like, I really want to share.
yeah, like, so yeah, if you can optimize for, maybe like interactions or things like that. I mean, there's probably also ways to game and trick the system here, but that's maybe a worthwhile cause. And then I was thinking of maybe what these tokens could then do is not only, you wouldn't just pay them the tokens, but since the idea was, what if the consultants would have to fork out a small piece or a small bit of their revenue so that we could pay it to the content creators? What if we didn't pay them directly, but indirectly, right? So they would get the tokens, and then if they stake the tokens, they would then unlock this like monthly or annual pay. Now, I don't know what that means. You mean if the
contributors stake the token? So say they earn 100 tokens and they stake, I don't know, 20. Then that 20 tokens, we say that those tokens are being used for content creation purposes. Is that it?
No, we would essentially, if they stake 20 tokens, they would unlock something like an annual yield that could come from the consulting gigs, right? So let's say we get via consulting 10,000 in like profits. We'll take 10% of that, and we could distribute this 1,000 then to everybody who's staking their tokens that they have earned through content creation. I mean, because it wouldn't only give you the call option, but it would also give you a dividend,
right?
In a way, right? And that's like even,
I got it.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe like even better. I don't know how securities laws will find this. We'll have to figure that out. But it would be an interesting mechanism, right? Just to incentivize.
Yeah, and the proof will be in the pudding, because you wouldn't have to mandate it. You would put that suggestion out there, and you'll just see how many token holders feel happy to do that, right?
Yeah, it would incentivize them to hold their tokens long term, because if you hold them and stake them, then you'll get paid every year or every month from something like it would be pretty much like a dividend, right? That's the reason why you would hold them, a share, because they, not only because there's potential upside in like the share price going up, but also because you get paid regularly, right? So yeah, I think like that, so that could be a mechanism.
Yeah. So then I think the crux of it will be, how do we assign value, right? Like, so going deeper into the weeds of how will a content creator get paid tokens? How do we assess how good his content is? If he's consistently creating a piece of content, is that worth more than somebody that's only creating a piece of content once every year? If there's somebody creating something every week, those two articles that being created consistently, are they or 10, let's say, that are being created consistently worth more than 10 that are created, randomly at very, very large time intervals, because then that doesn't build interest as effectively, stuff like that. I guess we're not going to know the answers now, but as we go forward, I think the magic will be in really being accurate in incentivizing good content, right?
Yeah. I think that's a very, very difficult nut to crack.
Because maybe disincentivizing bad content is also something that we can think of, right? Just to prevent people from. So if, say, usually when somebody writes a post, unless it's really bad, most people wouldn't comment, right? Like if it's good, it gets spread. If it's not that good, it just kind of stays there dormant, right?
Yeah.
But to prevent people from going, hey, I just want to earn these tokens, so I'm just going to create a 1,000 word article that actually says nothing at all.
Yeah.
You would see some some comments coming out going like, dude, I just wasted 5 minutes, 10 minutes of my life that I'll never get back, right?
Yeah.
And maybe if that happens, then I don't know, that guy's tokens are gone or something like that, right? Or 10% of it gets deducted or whatever, just to prevent people from writing really bad stuff.
If your tweet gets ratioed, then you
I don't know. I'm just really just putting it out there as it comes to mind. But it's just to prevent people from trying to game the system to say, hey, I want tokens. I can get a ghostwriter to write something. It's going to cost me $10 on Fiverr.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's really not what we want to do, right? We really want to build authenticity. We really want to build a community of people that really care about this space.
Yes. But I think that's going to be very, very difficult, and even harder will it be to scale it, so that it can be this automatic machine that runs on its own. I think that's going to be super hard. I mean, like, how do big journals or magazines or publishing houses do it, right? They probably have a lot of people. First, they have the contracts and they have all the hiring and stuff, and they find out how good people are. And but then they have editors that do the proofreading and do the final publishing or press that publishing button, right? So it has to go through this quality control towards the end, finding out. And that guy will to some degree know what type of articles work well and which don't. And so he'll quality control for that outcome. So yeah,
I guess we could do that in a DAO, right? Yeah, we could do that in a DAO. We get people to vote. The people stake their own reputation when they say this guy's proof of previous work is good enough. So somebody in the DAO might say, hey, Jason Nutter, I've read 3 of his previous posts. He's all right. I would say yes, go. And we could systematically say, as long as nobody says no, right? Like we need X number of votes. Like we need, I don't know, 8 votes from the community. If one person says no, then it needs to get reviewed, stuff like that. So a lot of tinkering will be needed.
That's true, yeah. And we'll have to, you have to balance when it is too much of controlling and overseeing when you spend too many resources on like improving that part of the process. But I think there's only so much you can, I guess, incentivize or optimize with tokens. There's always this other aspect, I guess, where just human nature comes in here and there, or trying to game systems and that. So,
but the beautiful thing about this, right, Flo, is if we iterate and we get it to improve, the system to keep improving, we would be then unlocking a formula that other people could then also, copy and paste and maybe imitate and adjust a little bit according to their needs. But it will not be valueless, right? This iteration process, it will also be very valuable, because we will also start to understand how, in a way, right, we're cracking this this code, I keep saying cracking the code, but we'll be discovering how people can work autonomously internationally, right?
Yeah.
To come out with something that pushes the flywheel,
Yeah.
And this should be something that can be shared with many different, endeavors, right? Not just tokenomics.
Yeah. But like I think the tokenomics for that and the incentives that you sort of create for that, they are key to making something like that work.
True.
And
yes.
Yeah, and I guess you see that with lots of other DAOs and communities out there on how they do stuff and how they are successful by designing their own tokens in the specific way that aligns with their goals and values and what they want to achieve, right? So yeah, there's a lot of these like super interesting mechanisms. So I guess one of them, and that's kind of also what I sort of was thinking through and on a recent podcast with Javier from Valorize, we talked about this model of a super high inflationary token. Like, let's say we would pay our content creators tokens, and I mean, it wouldn't be like super high inflationary, but we would. There's like two ways you could do it. Either you like cap the total supply of tokens, and that also caps the total supply of content that you can create, or you have an unlimited supply of tokens because you of course want to keep producing content over the years, right? So if
and in that way it is inflationary.
That way it is
right?
Inflationary, yeah. And what that does is, if we think about this, let's say the token allows you to vote, and it also gives you dividends of the revenues created. Now, let's say you and I, we create 10 articles now, and then we'll stop creating articles because we got interested in something else. Then over time, our total share would get diluted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because other people create and they get more tokens, and then inflation kind of dilutes our holdings and our share of voting power and our share of dividends.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an interesting model, I think, to keep people working and publishing content and producing content regularly. But what that does not do is it does not really incentivize early contributors to sort of participate in this upside. So this upside that you were talking about is something they wouldn't then really participate in because the token is just so inflationary. So it might, they might not be growing that much, even if the flywheel grows, right?
Yeah. Well, I would say both the inflationary and deflationary path can both be helpful to an extent, right? Like, in a way, it's the same thing. Like the inflationary one, you want to keep working at it because then you get more tokens, which then give you more value, right? Like more payout, more whatever, more incentive, financial incentive. But then the deflationary one, you might only need to start paying people less and less as time goes on because that token's worth more and more, right? So one's like the gold standard where the amount of gold available is the same, right? But a pound of butter used to cost 5 grams of gold. Now it only costs 1 gram because we know how to do it so much more efficiently, right?
Yeah.
So the inflationary one would be, hey, you better keep working. Don't just retire once you've got your, bag of gold coins, because we keep mining more gold every year. So your bag of gold coins aren't going to be worth much, right? So that one incentivizes work. Inflationary, let's say tokens or treasuries incentivize, or let's say what you just mentioned, that form of inflationary, model, they would incentivize consistent work, right? Never rest, keep working.
Yeah.
But long run, I'm not sure what that does, right? Like if somebody goes, hey, I've been working, if I continue doing this for 20, 30 years and I build up this whole, bunch of tokens, but I know that now the pool of contributors is so massive that the moment I stop, it's going to be worthless because that thing's doubling every year.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm exaggerating to just make a point, right?
But it could cause this kind of effect, right? Because everybody knows, hey, the more content is created, the more tokens are created. So, yeah, I guess if you want really value to accrue and there's in people to trust that this thing has some value, maybe the dividend can do a piece of that. But if that share dilutes too fast, then it won't be an interesting model. So what I thought about was, what if we did it like Bitcoin? You know, Bitcoin every 4 years they have this halving, and so every block that is mined is only paying out half the Bitcoin as before. So maybe we could do a similar model where in the beginning we'd pay out 10 tokens per piece of content, and then after half a year or a year we'd reduce that, we'd have that, and that you would keep having it, right? So that would mean in the beginning you would sort of incentivize people to get in early and produce content to get the flywheel going. But then once the flywheel is going, you would hope on the flywheel itself, and other payment effects that we maybe then have to keep it going. And you could kind of stop this inflationary effect, or like reduce it, right?
The only issue though with that is the first issue that I think that comes to mind is if our token or the token falls in value, it might serve no incentive, right? If the value is too low, because say right now it's worth, let's say $40 an hour, $40 US in 2022 an hour, right? And that's worth, I don't know, 5 Big Macs, right? And then we halve it, but the token value actually drops, right? So then maybe let's say the token value drops 50%, and we halve the number of tokens we give out. Then now it's only paying, what's that? Like 1 Big Mac, right?
Yeah.
and that might then go, hey, well, I'm definitely not doing it for the tokens because I'm doing it because I like to do it, but it's not for the tokens because it's not worth anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe if we could also do another model where we say it's always tied to a certain real life value, right? And if the token itself is growing in value because Tokenomics DAO, for example, is becoming a bigger company, it's churning more revenue, it's creating more dividends, let's say, then that token's value will go up. And then you could then do a halving, let's say, but a more organic halving where it's always worth the person's time on that day, right? But if things keep going better, then whatever they've earned should keep growing in value. But at that same time, it still incentivizes them at that period in time.
Yeah. I mean, like, how would you control that?
You could say you could use one point of reference, right? A harder currency, let's say, and just issue out,
or like
tokens.
The revenue of the DAO, and then you would
that's pretty cool. The revenue of the DAO, I like that because then it's real, right?
Yeah, cool. Because then what you want to keep in balance is like, does the amount of content that we produce balance with the amount of revenue that we make? So producing more content should lead to more revenue, and if that is the case, we can produce more content and issue more tokens for that, and like be as inflationary as we want to, if that leads to more revenue. So then the dividend would in fact like would stay the same, right? Even if it's diluted because the total revenue goes up. But if it's not the case, then we should definitely stop issuing the same amount of tokens. I think there's a protocol. I forgot which one it is, but yeah, I'll look it up and link it. But they do this similar model. They have their emission schedule, I think, tied to some internal metric that they have, right? I think it's the transaction volume or something. And so if that goes up, they'll issue more tokens, or they'll emit more tokens from the ones they have, right? Because they can grow the token supply into the value of their product. And that's, I think, is something that's like super important, right? So if your product is more valuable, then you can also put out more tokens because they will absorb it. The value will absorb it. But if you just put out more tokens and you're not growing value, that would punish the current holders, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It would.
So it's like this paladin thing, you know, this corporate action thing, right?
Yeah.
So the paladin, this mining company, they issue shares now to raise capital.
Mm-hmm.
And by issuing shares, if I'm a shareholder, like the value of mine would like go down because there's more supply of shares out there, right?
Yes.
For the amount of company that I get for that.
Yeah.
So they're kind of punishing me as a current shareholder, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing, yeah.
Yeah. No, but going back, yeah, I agree. And I think the way around it is really if you tie it to a product, like, you know, you hear people saying debt in itself is not bad, right? If you can borrow money to do something productive is actually good, you know. So say on a very large macro level, if you have a country that's totally undeveloped, you borrow money from some more developed country, you take that money, you build schools, you build infrastructure, whatever, and then arguably you give that community now a better chance at being more productive to lead like better, higher standards of living, right? And they then can create more value for the global community as a whole. So in that case, debt is good.
Yeah.
If you were taking that debt and you were using it to buy jet skis, right, to go around skiing around a lake nonstop, then that might not be the best way to use that debt, right? Because then that way it's inflationary in a sense that you're creating more pieces of, let's say, tokens, right? But it's not going into anything useful. So if you say to a content creator, you will pay them in tokens, and that token gives them an income based on what that entity is producing every day or year or month, I think it's actually pretty freaking cool, right? Because you're merging that directness that we were talking about earlier, right? Direct, you know, how direct a line you have to income with the possibility of getting your income to grow exponentially, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It'd be tantamount to you going to work for a company and you don't get a salary. The company would say, hey, on average, last year, we paid this much in dividends every 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And based on that, we're giving you this number of shares. And you know, if you do well and that dividend increases, you actually get paid more than what you're getting paid now. Yeah. You know?
And you have the upside that the shares that you get might also significantly increase in value because the company develops something really cool and therefore like has a much higher growth in revenue and therefore a much higher evaluation. Yeah.
And if that revenue keeps growing, then you need to give out less tokens to the next guy because that revenue now is so big that he doesn't need that many tokens anymore. So in that way, you organically get that halving effect, right?
Yeah, yeah. So why doesn't anybody in the corporate world do it?
I think because they don't want to. First of all, I don't know if it fits with the regulatory framework for fiat monetary systems, right? And secondly, do you really want a whole population to be principals and not agents? Like if you're like the dudes at the top, do you really want everyone to be acting independently out of their own self-interest and having like total sovereignty, right? I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to be too cynical about it, but I don't know.
You might not, but still, like nobody's done it.
I guess
one, right?
To a certain extent, if they give out shares to employees, is that something similar? I guess the higher up you go in the hierarchy of corporate, your pay gets more and more based on share performance, right? Versus salary. So I guess they do it, but it's for a small amount of the elite, right?
Yeah, higher ranks, because they would want their incentives aligned with the incentives of the company more, right? But on the lower levels, they don't. But I don't know why.
I'm too cynical, man. Sorry, but it's similar to like the aristocracies in the past, right? Like, hey, get the farmers to go to war. If they win, they keep getting fed. You tell them you'll lower their taxes, but if the aristocrats win, they get more land, right? It's the classic thing of one getting paid in terms of consumption and one getting paid in terms of assets.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll have to have that conversation about the regulatory aspects. But I think this is still something like super interesting, what's happening and what's evolving. I don't know if you had the chance to listen to this one podcast. I listened to it yesterday or so. It was about like DAOs and the future of work. And it was really a cool overview of how they've kind of like set this up and built this up, and what it could mean in the future if more and more people become like principals and owners in something, right? Definitely should. I'll link it. I just need to close the window because the neighbors' boys are running around.
They're just super excited about DAOs.
Yeah, I think so, because I said the word, so they immediately.
Maybe we can bring someone from the corporate world, right, to come in and share like, why is it that this isn't done? If we don't have anyone in mind right now, I guess, but if we do, maybe bring them on and just discuss the concept with them, see what they think. Ask them if it's something that they would bring into their own company, right?
Well, because like it can't be just that you have a blockchain now that this is now the coolest thing ever to create a DAO and make people owners, right? Somebody must have thought about this before us. We're not the first ones doing this, right? It's just it can't be.
No, it can't be. It's in a way. Okay, wait. What does a co-op mean? When you have something like in Germany, they often have these things where they say this thing is like totally employee owned. It's not for profit. Everything goes back towards everyone that works in that co-op. Am I using the right term? Is it co-op?
I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Like you can go and say, hey, everyone that works for this supermarket chain or whatever, you get paid your salary, but at the end of the year, they don't really take a profit. I think they give all that profits back to the employees. They split it, and so at the end of the year, you're basically not a for-profit organization. So it's employee owned. So in some sense, it's pretty similar, right? Like I guess they would give out. Then it depends on how they would give out that profit share. Do they give it out as a percentage prorated to your salary, Do they give it out and say, hey, every single person is equal, so if there's $1,000 made and 100 people, then everyone gets $10?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That still wouldn't include the ownership, like this long-term upside.
No, yeah, it does not.
For that, you would need something like shares.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, maybe we can research that for the next one, or bring somebody on who knows. I'd definitely be interested in like exploring the history of this, right? Because yeah, I think that's something maybe we can do in another podcast. I mean, maybe we probably need to do some research to bring somebody on for this. But like the history, like who has tried similar things, and how is what DAOs and like what you can do with tokens, how is that now different?
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely makes it easier, the infrastructure, right? You don't have to, and that is maybe because it's all like just still gray zones out there. But like just the simplicity, you can spin up a DAO pretty easily and issue a token, and it costs you next to nothing. Whereas if you'd go through like an SEC process to register a security, that costs you a ton of money and will take a lot of time to do, right? To replicate something similar with like ownership and dividends and all that kind of stuff. But here you can just spin it up, and we see all these different DAOs that are doing it and building stuff based upon this model. So maybe, yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest benefits I see. Yeah.
So the history of starting the history of like profit sharing and ownership and incentivization, right? For human beings to work together in groups, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's what tokenomics in a way is, but like applied to Web3 specifically. But what would be like the history of tokenomics pre-blockchain? What would that be?
Man, maybe I'll have to finally read Karl Marx.
I don't know, do it.
You'll see me coming on here next time, like with like super black eye bags and big beard and going. Because from the little that I have, I mean, from whenever I hear about people referencing communist manifestos, right? It's usually, to be fair to them, they often get describe the problem pretty well, I think, right? They describe that, hey, a small group of elites control the means of production, right?
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, it is true, right? And it's just that their methodology of then sharing that means of like the profits, the surplus from that means of production is gets corrupted, right? Like whether it's because they don't get how human nature works, or the incentives are not aligned enough, or there's people steal like backdooring things, stealing things, short-circuiting things. So it's definitely not a new concept, right, to talk about how we can share profits in a more equitable way. And yeah,
but like
I think
a lot of ownership, right? I think it's not only about sharing profits.
Well, the communists would say they're very good at sharing ownership because everyone owns everything.
Yeah.
And so they would say, hey, why don't you work harder? I mean, this you own this state.
You own
right?
a piece of the state. Yeah.
I was listening to this podcast. I think I shared it with you guys, right? With that guy talking about how the Russian economy was post the USSR collapse.
Oh yeah.
And like how they were just giving out coupons to everyone, saying that, hey, you now own a piece of the state, and these pre-oligarch dudes went there and just borrowed foreign money and then just bought everything up for pennies, right?
All these assets.
And so somebody might say, hey, who says we did give ownership away? People were, but it didn't work, right? And it's obvious that it wouldn't work, but it just means that there's a lot of nuance in terms of how ownership gets shared. It's not only about sharing ownership, it's how it's shared.
And maybe it's about like the liquidity of what you can do with the ownership. I guess like specifically in the USSR, the problem was that the people that were given this ownership, they now had an ownership in some Russian steel mill, but they were hungry, right? So what are you going to do? You can't eat the ownership ticket, and you can't, you maybe couldn't dice it up and buy some bread for it or something like that. But if you were given like tokens, then you could use these to sell off a small chunk to pay your rent and keep the rest.
Yeah. So with no liquidity, the underlying assets had no value and or had no price. Had no price. It had a value. It had no price.
Yeah.
And therefore couldn't be transacted properly. Right. Yeah, super interesting. We definitely should delve into that. Like and maybe with tokenomics, with Web3, finally the technology is there so that protocols can be put in place that's trustless. Right? That you don't need to make sure that only, like, how are you going to make sure that every single human being in a system has 100% integrity? You don't, right? And then the more you can't. And then there's that prisoner's dilemma where that first guy who cheats, he gets to get away with, and then the next guy goes, hey, if I don't cheat, I'm the stupid one. I have to cheat, right?
Yeah.
And then by that time, the whole system becomes so inefficient that if you come into the system, you have to cheat just to survive because the normal payout is not enough.
Yeah. Incentives misaligned.
In a trusted system. So maybe trustless systems will help to close that loop. You can get that super duper architect at the top to think about things. You can build the system. You can then see if the talent comes in, right? So the second thing about communism is that the energy that came into the system, that gravity that you need for any system to work, was not carrots, it was sticks, right? If you didn't work, you didn't get paid, you'd freeze to death.
Yeah.
Right. But with Web3, you're able to build a system and then say, hey, does anyone want to come?
It's a carrot system.
Yeah, it's carrots. Right.
Yeah. I like that analogy. Yeah.
So how should we title this episode? The
I was just thinking
flywheel
about
to the
that.
carrot.
Yeah.
Fly. Good
episode.
to great carrots.
Yeah. Well, I think we should leave that to Lovis. He can.
Lovis will come out with something good.
Yeah.
He loves carrots.
Yeah. So there you go. Cool, man. I think that was interesting exploring this. And maybe we can do that in another episode. Talk a bit about like the history, things like that.
Yeah. Hey, Flo, just before you go, just a question, would you say that coming away from conversations like these, you're maybe in some really, really small way, you've come away a bit different, like you've learned something, or you've gotten some different perspectives, or you've organized your thoughts in a different way? Would you say that that would be the case?
Always,
right? Like I feel that too. And it's something that's not very appreciated, right? When people make authentic content, like it's hard to advertise that. Like, how do you tell content? We talked about it earlier. How do we incentivize content creation, right? But I think it's, if we can somehow communicate that to people, to say, hey, when you do create an authentic piece of content where you're really in an exploratory mood, right? You actually come away from it different. You come away from it better, I think,
like
even if you, I just want to say, even if you haven't learned anything new, whatever you have in your mind, right? You actually get a little bit more context, or it goes a bit deeper because you've tested it a bit, right?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. There's this guy on Twitter. I forgot the name. I'll look him up and put him in the show notes. He does this like diagrams or like charts or animations, and he basically talks about writing and what that does to your mind. And I thought that was like so cool. And maybe I can like link one of these, but it's basically this, like, one of them is where he has like this, you think, and then it's like this like wild, unstructured thing that you got there, right? And then if you kind of write that into a draft, it gets a little bit better. But then if you write that into an article that you publish and you want people to read, that then like sorts everything and like puts these puzzle pieces into place, because the process of writing like makes you challenge your own thoughts that you had. And I think this conversation on a podcast might not be on the same level, because it is like ad hoc, right? There's like some things that,
still
it is
jumbled,
in some way, But
Yeah.
I think I really like this for like the idea generation. So like we talk about something, and then sometimes like mid-sentence when I'm talking, I get like this, boom, something unlocks that I hadn't thought about before, and it kind of comes to mind. And that's then when you said like I walk away from these conversations, I'm like, yeah, that's actually a pretty cool way to do it. Or this is like a completely new idea that I had, or that we've uncovered together.
And if you, exactly. And if you go down that chain even further, right, you stop just now at writing an article that you're putting out in public, right? But if you take even one more step, right, like now you're supposed to teach what you just wrote, like get somebody to understand it, right? Then you're taking even a deeper step, right? Because now you're starting to think, how do I make this relevant to somebody that it's not relevant for yet? And then you start to think about things from their perspective, right? And if we can get this thing right, consulting in some aspects, it's also an educational activity, right? In some ways, not in total, but in some ways, you're taking an idea, a knowledge, and understanding, and imparting it to someone else, right? And so if we can just connect that loop to go discovery, exploration, all the way down to educating, and then come back to the top again and go, hey, now that you've reached a deeper level, now let's have a conversation again, right? And let's go creative again. Then in that way, we would be connecting those two, the home builders and the home designers, right?
And it's
so I'm very excited about that.
And that's like a complete incentive on its own, right? It's this, you come and join a DAO, work on a topic that you're interested in, just to get better, like to learn more, to like, exchange your thoughts with somebody else in order to make your thought process or your knowledge better. Deeper. I
wonder if we could coin a phrase, something like we're a bunch of apprenticing experts, right? Like the journey is still going, like you might be an expert in your field, but it doesn't mean that you can't go deeper, right? It doesn't mean you can't go broader. And if you keep having that attitude that you can always still learn more, whether from other people or by yourself going deeper, that's, I think, also something pretty cool. When you say, hey, come to the DAO to learn more. It doesn't mean that you're a student. You could be the world's best at something, but you're still on that learning journey, right?
And that to me is like the biggest value of the DAO, of the community that we're creating, is like you bring together people that, and that's something that I said this a few times, that's something that didn't exist before in that way, right? We never had the same 600 people in the same Discord assembled before. That didn't exist. And now you have them, and you have access to different minds, different thoughts, and you can do all this like exploration, deepen your knowledge, exchange ideas and stuff like that. So that's, for me, that's like super valuable. Like every day I talk to people with like really interesting ideas, and that just deepens my knowledge, my understanding, and theirs too, I guess. So that's a value add. For me, that's like one of the biggest incentives.
So should we try and close the episode again? I won't disrupt you this time.
You do it now.
And since Lovis isn't here, should we try and do a plug? Like, I'm not good at this. So guys, if you want to like join us on this crazy learning journey. Tokenomics DAO, right? Flo?
Yeah. Join us on our Discord. We've got a cohort that's currently ongoing to become contributor, to join, write articles, do consulting, and just, work and explore this whole space together with us. We'll link the stuff in the show notes, and we'd, like to see you on Discord if you're keen.
Yeah, and come on and give us feedback about what we're doing. We'd love to hear that too.
It's always good. Cool.
All right.